Coogs House. The Houston Cougars look to continue this win streak in the Big 12 this weekend with a fun game, but are they being set up?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to stop by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way you can listen to Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. If you found us on YouTube, welcome back to the YouTube channel. It is so good to see you again. Remember to hit subscribe because we're doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers on YouTube. The next one of those is at 2,000. We are approaching that very quickly. We're up over the 1950 mark or so right now, around that mark. So hit subscribe. Help us get there. Like and comment the video to let us know you are in that contest. If you hear the preview of this Kansas State game over the weekend, or that's happening over the weekend, you just don't know what to say. You're more of a football person, or you're just a hater who came to step by that's not used to getting asked all these questions. Tell us in the comments down below. When it comes to opening a straw, do you tear it off or do you tap it off? All right, I want to talk a little bit about this game across the entire show today. We're going to preview it because I think it's kind of an important game for Houston for a number of reasons. Also, I'm a big fan of Jerome Tang and what they're doing up there at Kansas State, and so I want to give them the proper due. First, I want to talk in the first segment about Kansas State as an opponent and Jerome Tang's Kansas State, because Jerome Tang's Kansas State is not the Kansas State I think we probably think of from the days when you and I might have been growing up, or at least the days I'm growing up. I don't want to show my age. And then the second segment, we'll do something on the matchups. I think there's some interesting matchups here because the one spot where anyway, we'll get to that in the segment. I got some concerns. And then last, I want to talk about the final segment. Is this the Big 12 basketball's equivalent of a trap game? Houston has a difficult schedule and a stressful week coming up, but they can't look past this one for a number of reasons. So we got to get into that in the third segment. But first, the game at hand is against Kansas State this Saturday morning, 11 a.m. local time. Now, Houston obviously played on Tuesday in Utah, got home late Tuesday night, and has been at home practicing. Kansas State played at Iowa State Wednesday night, right? Then gets back home late Thursday morning, presumably. Has Thursday, and then Friday has to travel to Houston to wake up on Saturday and play at Fertitta. I understand that it's a gauntlet. That's the most commonly used phrase associated with Big 12. That seems crazy difficult, and I'm not jealous of it at all. That I think could play in this game. Now, Kansas State this year, they lost to USC on opening night, and I think a lot of people thought that was going to be a bigger thing about USC than it has been. They lost to Miami, Nebraska. In conference, they lost at Tech, and they lost that game at Iowa State on Wednesday. Big wins. I think Will Roberts is a program that's typically very tough to knock out. They beat them in overtime. They beat Villanova. They beat LSU. In conference play, they beat Central Florida. They won at West Virginia. They beat Baylor in overtime. And they beat Oklahoma State at home recently. Now, I say that to say that I think you can get caught up in watching that they lose to a Tech. And then we think of the team we beat, and then think of transitive property, and we're going to beat that team. I don't think very highly of Nebraska in the present state of Nebraska basketball. But obviously, they lost them, so you could draw whatever conclusion you want from that. We'll talk about the matchups later and the personnel later in the show. But this is a team that starts 5 guys that have transferred there either last year or this year, right? It's a very new team, very newly put together. And it's fair to point out that, especially in those games early in the season, USC or Miami, they're clearly still pulling it together. And that's going to click at some point for them. And, I mentioned that I like Jerome Tang as a coach. Jerome Tang coached at Heritage Christian Academy in Cleveland, Texas, so not too far away by any stretch. He coached some future NBA players there. And he ultimately left there to go be an assistant for Scott Drew at Baylor. And he was the lead assistant for Baylor when they won the national title in the same Final Four. Yes, the Houston was in and got knocked out by Baylor in the Final Four. Still a great run. I still don't have any, obviously anything like resentments about that run. But that same Baylor team, he was the lead assistant on. He got to Kansas State last season and had a really, really impressive season there. In his year and a half-ish at Kansas State, he's lost just 14 games. That's really good, folks. And this team is really good. This team is really talented. But I say all to say that they're very well coached. They're athletic. They roll with one traditional big man and 4 athletic guards. Now, we'll talk about the matchup in a second, but this is a second year in a row with a different point guard that they have a shorter point guard out there. They're a good but not great team in a bunch of different categories, and I actually think that makes them fairly challenging. They're good but not great at getting to the lane and finishing around the rim. They're good but not great from behind the arc. They're good but not great at offensive rebounding. They're good but not great at cutting off driving lanes. They're good but not great at blocking shots inside of 10 feet. And I say all that to say that actually, if you're adding it up, yes, it's good, but not great as far as relative to national measures and analytics and things like that. If you want to get in rankings and comparisons to find minutia, but they are good at so many of those things that the sum of the parts I think is bigger than any one of them. Impressive team to build through the portal like that because, like I said earlier, I think they will click at some point. Schematically with defense, they try to trap along sidelines and wings, and you can kind of see the way that they angle their bodies as they defend into the slot areas, like free throw and extended areas. They're trying to push guys out to the sideline to then come up and trap from the bottom side, the baseline area. They really like to use those sidelines and baselines as a third defender to force a full trap. Frankly, I didn't see a whole lot of successful trapping happening not on the sidelines and baselines. And again, when you talk about good, not great, that's another thing I'd say that they're good at, but not top 5 in the country at, but good at, right? And so that's going to be impressive. Obviously, I think higher of Houston's defense, but I don't think they're a bad defensive team coming from Manhattan, the Little Apple, by any stretch. They will make Houston turn it over a couple times. The goal is for Houston to be awake and ready to play at 11 a.m. and not turn over 12 times. I mean, we've seen Houston play poorly to start these 11 a.m. games in the past, even under Kelvin Sampson. It's just hard to get your body as a college kid ready to play basketball at 11 a.m. And coming out a little sloppy in this one, you could end up having 4 or 5 turnovers in the first 7 minutes and, make this a game that it doesn't need to be. On offense, they have a 4-guard, 4 perimeter guy, I should say, because they're not all guards, but sets. Their sets are really about overloading one side of the floor and then getting quick actions on the side with the ball that kind of let guys, for lack of a better phrase, cook. They do a lot of individual plays that put pressure on the rim. And then if I'm attacking the rim and I can't get in the basket or I can't get to the rim, I pull up and kick out. And then the next guy, my buddy, will drive. And a lot of constant rim pressure. They also, to help create that rim pressure, will pull their center, the traditional big man, out along the perimeter as a passer. And that will theoretically, he either gets easy passing lanes and windows because you sink your big man back and try and protect the rim on it, or he has to go out and play on the perimeter and you have to defend the rim. Houston does such a good job of keeping the ball in front of them. I imagine Javier just goes, or whoever the center is at the time, goes out and just covers the big man like a perimeter player. I touted Javier for his perimeter defense in the BYU game just 2 days ago. I think he's really, really good at it and grown a lot. That does mean, though, that guys have to be better at keeping the ball in front of them and maybe can't gamble as much on going for steals and those, coming over from the backside on traps because there's no 6'10" guy at the rim, or I guess technically Francis is 6'9" and long armed, but that's interesting to see how that plays out. I imagine that's what Houston goes with, though, because of how athletic they are at the guard spots and keeping guys in front of them. There is a matchup here that worries me, with the way they space this out because it can put guys on islands. And while I have faith in a lot of Houston defenders individually, there's some uphill battles that you just can't get over. I mean, they're just some things are Jimmy's and Joe's. Now, I want to talk about that in the second segment, but first, I want to talk about some Jimmy's and Joe's stuff that maybe going to watch games across Houston, going to watch games all over the city, or maybe even going to the big game, because right now, Game Time is doing a great job of offering our listeners all kinds of deals at the Game Time app. If you want to go see comedy, concerts, other sporting events, anything else going on around Houston, you can do it. But right now, you can do that on the Game Time app. But right now, you can also do all kinds of things in Vegas. Now, what would you do with an extra $100 in Vegas? If you're there for the big game, would you buy yourself a great dinner, put it on, 27? Would you just go to nickel slots and see how long it lasts? Whatever the case may be, there's a chance to get $100 in your pocket on the way to Vegas, because right now, terms will apply, but you can take all the guest workout of buying tickets to the Game Time and get $100 off a big game ticket with code VEGAS100. It's VEGAS 100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the big game, you're watching a home like I will. I know. You can use code LOCKED ON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase if you download the Game Time app today for any ticket around the H. Again, that's LOCKED ON, LOCKEDON. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I said that there was a matchup that bugged me, and I want to get into them at first. One that does not bug me is their point guard, Tyler Perry, spelled Tylor. I feel like I should point that out. 5'11", comes from North Texas. McCaslin's a great job of coaching up guards. He's now at Texas Tech. When he left, Tyler Perry left to go to Kansas State. He is a more traditional pass-first kind of guy. He's scoring a decent amount of points. He's getting about 14 a game, but he's also leading them in assists at just over 5. He's a good point guard. I don't mean to say that he's not, but I have a lot of faith in Jamal Shead covering him. I think it's a very obvious matchup, and I am taking Jamal Shead 11 out of 10 times. I'm taking him when you don't even ask me in that matchup. Now, that said, that's not to say that Tyler Perry can't go off in his. I mentioned I watched the Baylor and Iowa State games. Against Baylor specifically, Perry went 11 or 12 from the free throw line. He's great at getting the lane, great at forcing contact. And if I'm Coach Jerome Tang, I see Houston needing Jamal Shead on offense so bad, I'm probably drawing up a similar game plan. So Tyler Perry getting Jamal Shead in foul trouble and then out of the game worries me. But if they're both in the game, I have a lot of faith in Jamal Shead in this matchup. He's not like a tremendous three-point shooter. He's, I guess, technically shooting at just over 30% from the three-point line, but he's also shooting like over 8 attempts. And so it's kind of broken clock right twice a day kind of thing to me. I really think of good shooters as being closer to 35. And certainly if you're shooting that many attempts, I would anticipate like there's a reason you're shooting that many attempts. And I think the main reason Perry shoots that many attempts from behind the arc is because he is listed at 5'11", and I imagine that's an easier place to get a shot off than it is inside of that. And then, get inside the cup and get your free throws. Cam Carter's a 6'3" shooting guard. He's a Mississippi State transfer. I imagine he's an LJ Cryer matchup. He's listed at 6'3", so size-wise, I think that's the most natural thing. He's also a guy that shoots a high volume of threes with a relatively average percentage, over 6 threes per game, shooting about 32%. LJ Cryer matchup there to me makes the most sense because he's not hyper physical. He's not going to bully LJ Cryer around as I see it. He does shoot a lot of 2-point stuff as well. He is a leading scorer, Cam Carter is. And so you could talk me into flip-flopping this Cryer and Shead because Cam Carter is more important or whatever. But Perry does such a great job orchestrating the offense. I feel like if you can turn him over and force him to get flustered, that's why I think it's important. So that's why I put Jamal Shead there. The forward spots are interesting because they're a little bit taller at two of them, and I think Houston can make up for it with length and effort. David Nagason is listed at 6'9". If you told me he was 6'10", I believe you. He transferred from Virginia Tech last year to play for one Jerome Tang. Now, he's who I'm projecting to start here. He started every game thus far. They've had success with other forwards off the bench, so we'll see. He's getting, 7.5 points, 7.5 rebounds. He's high energy guy, athletic guy. I think Jawan, in a healthy sense, will be fine. If Jawan's knee is bugging him, this is the kind of athlete that makes you pay there, right? And so Jawan's had an extra couple of days off compared to Kansas State. I thought he looked pretty good and mobile even after getting banged up in the BYU game. But if Roberts is hurting, this is a problematic matchup. Athletically, Nagason is just going to put a hurting on guys that can't move very well, right? The center they play out there the most often, the more traditional center, is Will McNair. I should say Will McNair Jr., I guess to be proper. He's listed at 6'10". If you told me he was 6'11", I'd believe you. He's got long arms. He's a strong kid. It'd be a great matchup, frankly. I see him in France being a great matchup. He plays along the perimeter again to pull rim protectors away from the basket. He is a lob threat on rolls. He's not like explosive like Dwight Howard, center explosive, but he dunks everything. His goal is to dunk everything. And from what I can tell, if you can make him dribble, like just put the ball on the ground one time, he's going to pick it up and try and pass the ball, right? If he can dunk it, if he can catch on a lob, if he can dunk it with just good footwork or in motion to dunk it, he will, and he'll punish the rim when he does it. He's not going to do anything else that involves him putting the ball down. McNair comes from Mississippi State, was at New Mexico before that. He's actually a third school. I think he's a grad transfer from one of those two, obviously. I imagine, I guess, Mississippi State. That's what's Parker. He's threatening, and I think what they do with him and how much he pulls Francis away from the rim will be interesting. But the threat that I see in this game, and maybe this is still me worried about Iowa State because one of the two games I watched of Kansas State was Iowa State, and I was having eerie, nightmares about playing in Ames, is Arthur Kaluma. Arthur Kaluma is 6'7". He is a shooter, and frankly, once he's hit a couple of threes, he can pump and go and thunders it down against the rim, right? He's a Creighton transfer. Athletically, he's tall, he's long, he's explosive. Shooting, he's their best shooter from behind the arc of anyone of note. Make sure I got this right. He's shooting 40% on 4.5 threes per game. So why they don't get him more threes and get Tyler Perry threes beyond me. But once he's hit a couple, again, he's also a threat to go to the basket. I imagine Houston starts with Emmanuel Sharp on him. Kaluma is 6'7". Sharp is 6'4"-ish, 6'5"-ish. That's a troublesome matchup because I think of Iowa State turn around and shooting over the top of Houston because they were taller. I think of this as being the kind of guy that can put Sharp in foul trouble because the way he attacks the rim on like sloppy closeouts, and ultimately that puts Sharp in foul trouble. Houston needs Sharp on the floor to score. We saw Sharp as a rebounder last week against BYU, right? Sharp is too important to Houston to be off the floor for that long. I get worried about this matchup. I don't know what else to do. I guess great defender is Jamal Shead. I don't think you give up a half foot in size there. I don't think that helps Houston. And as great defender as Jawan Roberts is. I don't think that Sharp is any better a matchup on a more traditional post playing forward, right? Like Nagason or McNair is. So it's the automatic matchup. I think you'll see a number of different guys thrown at him. You also see Damian Doan, it's his turn. Malik Wilson could get some run. We saw him running as a non-point guard in the last couple of games. Does he get in there to do this because he's a little bit longer? And then truthfully, when Kaluma has the ball, the whole defense has to be aware of where he is, right? He's that kind of a guy. He, again, isn't like going crazy in points. He's getting 15 a game. For reference, Cam Carter is getting 16. And so if you're doing the math at home, that's 3 guys with 14 or more points per game. If you add in Tyler Perry there. But he's he's the kind of athlete that gives Houston problems. So if you were to tell me crystal ball, Houston lost this game, I'd imagine it's because unless something crazy happens, I'd imagine it would intuitively be because Kaluma had 28 or something, right? And I don't think he will. I think Sampson and company are trying to put a plan for that. But this game can feel like a trap. And I said I want to talk about that in the third segment, and we'll talk about that in the third segment some. Now I talk through the starters. But Houston Cougar basketball is not the only game this weekend. And while I'd like to win, and I'm sure you would too, you can go win yourself as opposed to just watching the Cougs at FanDuel. Because right now, FanDuel, even though the football season is I guess, almost over, it's hard to believe it's conference championship weekend. Super Bowl's in a couple weeks. But even though the season is almost over, you can still get in on the action at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed if you place a $5 bet. It's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, if you just place a $5 bet. Of the 4 teams remaining, the Baltimore Ravens have 2 Houston Cougars. The other 3 have none. So I'm saying to go find them and take them at -3 to beat the Chiefs in Baltimore. The money line there is at -205 Ravens way as well. So go get $150 in bonus bets. Put $5 down. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet at FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. One last note on the matchups, and I will say I didn't intend on going the full segment there with just the starters. Notably, Kansas State has 6 guys that play 20 or more minutes. The guys 7 and 8 both play a little over 10 minutes, and there's a big drop-off after that. They don't go very deep. Houston's at home. You hope to get a friendly whistle at home. The way Houston plays does kind of put refs in conflict about do they call it offensive, defensive, or what have you. If Houston can get some of those guys in foul trouble or wear them out because of the way they play, especially given the travel schedule we mentioned at the top about that Kansas State has, that definitely would be a problem because Houston is much deeper. Houston should play the full 9-man rotation. This one really take advantage of, especially at home, especially with the crowd. Now, this game, I think, could play out as a trap game. Now, I know we think of trap game as a football concept because in basketball, there's so many more games. Dropping one intuitively doesn't have to be a problem. However, the way the Big 12 is built right now, truthfully, to win this league, to make a run at win this league, to be the top of the league, you just have to win your home games. There's just no way around it. You get 18 games, as I mentioned last year. The winner of the Big 12 in the regular season went 13-5. And to get in that 11, 12, 13 range and to have a shot at, frankly, being at the top of this conference, having a top-tier seed, a 1 or a 2 seed in March Madness in the NCAA tournament, you need to win your home games and then hopefully split on the road and get somewhere around that marker. As great as winning on Tuesday was in Provo, and it was a great game, a fun game, losing a home game kind of spoils that as far as, your win-loss record goes in this conference. You're trying to win half your road games and all your home games. And so this home game is important. It's also sandwiched between a big road win in BYU and probably the 2 biggest road games on the schedule in a long, long, long time. Houston plays Kansas State in Houston at 11 a.m. on Saturday. And I've said my piece about 11 a.m. That's just a recipe for disaster. 11 a.m. is a hard time to play a basketball game. They then play at UT Austin on Monday night. Now, Houston's got almost exclusively guys from the state of Texas. Everyone on their roster at some point either wanted to play against or wanted to play for the University of Texas at Austin. It's just the way kids grow up in the state of Texas, right? You either wanted to be one or you wanted to beat them. And honestly, it would be very much a college-minded thing to be saying, man, Kansas State's lost some games. They ain't that great. I can't wait to go beat Texas on Monday, right? And starting at roughly 1:15 on Saturday, let's all think about going to beat Austin on Monday. However, between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., Houston's got to take care of business. And if you thought that wasn't enough, you're like, okay, but like, it's the Texas, like, they can figure it out. Texas isn't having a normal Texas year. They're not very good this year or whatever, right? You can figure that out. The following road game, February 3rd, a week from Saturday, Houston goes up to Kansas to play at the Fog Allen Fieldhouse, one of the most legendary stadiums in all of college basketball, one of the most legendary blue blood programs in all of college basketball. And Houston, as a program, has been trying to prove for 3 or 4 years now that they are on that tier of college basketball. And I could make the argument a number of different ways that they are. But winning that game on February 3rd, a week from Saturday, would do a lot for my argument, their argument, our argument that Houston is a blue blood. I will say that that's exciting conversation to have, and I cannot wait to have it with you next week. However, if these college kids, again, I want to reiterate, college kids are thinking about any of that between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. on Saturday, this Kansas State team can beat you. And frankly, you don't have to play that poorly for them to do it. They beat a top 10 Baylor team just 10 days ago, right? And I was impressed in watching that one, frankly. Jerome Tang himself is undefeated when the game is tied at the end of regulation. That's really darn impressive, folks. Especially when you consider the fact that he's a Big 12 basketball coach. I mean, a lot of those games are in the Big 12. This team is talented. This team is athletic. They got a good point guard. They got 3 guys that can score, one of which I mentioned is a matchup problem. If Houston is not ready for this game, or is thinking about something else, or is taking a while to wake up on a Saturday morning, they've got a problem. No pun intended. I hate that pun. Why did I do that? I hate that pun. But they do, right? I wonder, frankly, selfishly, and this is my own 2 cents, of all of the games Houston has had and will have in this Big 12 conference slate, Kansas State struck me as an interesting game to have a blackout game. They announced it last Saturday, I should say, that Houston was going to black out and they're going to pass out black T-shirts, and it's a fun time. If you're within an hour radius, go. I'm telling you, it's going to be a fun time. It's a great pair of basketball teams. Fertitta's awesome. Go. But I wonder if they put this blackout game on the marketing merch calendar as a way to at least create and drum up some atmosphere for what they were worried about being a game that you kind of need to have and need that atmosphere in, right? Because if you're a college student, you're like, I got to wake up on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. to go watch this game. I'm going to just drive down to Austin. I'll go watch them. That'll be a fun one. I'll go watch that one on Monday, right? Or I'll catch them the next time, right? Or whatever, right? I wonder if, while Houston's been dominant at home all year long, including Big 12 play, if that was somewhat intentional in how they got to the idea that this is the game to have a blackout for. That's awesome. It's going to be fun. Go show up, be raucous. Big 12 basketball deserves that, and we deserve Big 12 basketball. However, I have to ask, did they see that coming as well? If you think I'm crazy, if I'm too far off base, if you think I'm a lunatic, if you think, I don't know, you tap or tear your straw, tell me in the comments down below. I appreciate it. I go through and I try to read every single one of them. Hit comments, hit like and subscribe. Help us get to 2,000, the next 250 marker on YouTube as well. If you want to talk about Houston Cougars, college basketball, high school basketball, anything Houston sports, you can find me at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, and all of your favorite social media handles. Thank you all again for listening today and making us your first listen today. Locked On Coogs is a proud Locked On podcast. Now, that means your team our Cougs, our number 4 ranked Cougs every day. Go Cougs.